Brandon Fugal just violated his federal non-disclosure agreement about Skinwalker Ranch, risking prosecution to reveal what government ordered him to keep secret. He disclosed technical specifications of the underground structure he was forbidden to discuss, named classified Pentagon officials who visited the property, and exposed connections to Area 51 and other government sites. Subscribe immediately because what Brandon just revealed about ancient technology, non-human materials, and decades of government cover-ups could cost him his freedom. He decided truth matters more than NDAs. The secrets are finally coming out. When Brandon Fugal purchased Skinwalker Ranch in 2016 from aerospace billionaire Robert Bigelow, the property transfer came with far more than just deed paperwork and title insurance. It included a complex web of pre-existing non-disclosure agreements, security clearances, and legal restrictions that had been established during Bigelow's ownership when he was conducting classified research for the Defense Intelligence Agency under a program called Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. These existing NDAs were transferred to Brandon as conditions of the sale, meaning he inherited legal obligations to maintain secrecy about specific discoveries, data, and government involvement at the property before he even took ownership. But the legal restrictions didn't stop with inherited agreements from the previous owner. As Brandon began conducting his own investigations, using advanced scanning technologies and scientific methodologies that quickly surpassed anything Bigelow had attempted, multiple federal agencies approached him independently, demanding that he sign additional non-disclosure agreements covering new discoveries being made under his ownership and research direction. The Department of Defense, through representatives from the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, required Brandon to sign comprehensive NDAs preventing disclosure of technical specifications about any anomalous materials discovered on the property, electromagnetic signature data that might reveal classified sensor capabilities, and detailed information about aerial phenomena that could compromise national security if publicly released. Additional NDAs were required by classified aerospace programs operating under Special Access Program protocols, restricting Brandon's ability to discuss specific technological capabilities discovered through ground-penetrating radar and materials analysis, the results of radiation testing and spectrographic analysis of unknown substances, and most significantly, any information about government personnel who visited the property to conduct their own classified assessments and experiments. The cumulative effect of these layered non-disclosure agreements created a comprehensive legal cage around Brandon's ability to communicate publicly about the most significant findings at Skinwalker Ranch. He could discuss general observations about lights in the sky or strange animal behavior for entertainment purposes on the History Channel show, but the truly groundbreaking scientific discoveries, the ones with potential to revolutionize human understanding of technology, history, and our place in the universe, remained locked behind walls of classification and legal threats. The penalties for violating these NDAs were spelled out explicitly in the agreements and subsequent legal communications from government attorneys. For years, Brandon Fugal carefully navigated the treacherous legal landscape created by his multiple non-disclosure agreements, finding ways to hint at discoveries and generate public interest through the Skinwalker Ranch television series while technically remaining within the boundaries of what federal agencies permitted him to disclose. He became expert at speaking in carefully parsed language that acknowledged something significant was happening at the property without crossing into specifics that would trigger violation of his NDAs. But this careful balancing act became increasingly untenable as the scope and significance of discoveries at the ranch expanded beyond anything Brandon had anticipated when he first purchased the property. The catalyst that finally pushed Brandon to make the calculated decision to violate his non-disclosure agreements despite the severe legal consequences came from multiple converging factors that made continued silence morally untenable in his assessment. The primary trigger was the government's escalating efforts to not just classify ongoing research, but to retroactively classify all historical data from the property and implement what Brandon characterized as a comprehensive burial operation designed to ensure that Skinwalker Ranch discoveries would never reach public awareness or scientific scrutiny. Federal officials began demanding that Brandon turn over all scan data, all materials samples, all video footage, and all analysis results to government custody, where they would be immediately classified at the highest levels and removed from any possibility of peer review or public disclosure. When Brandon resisted these demands, Citing his property rights and his commitment to scientific transparency, government attorneys responded with increasingly aggressive threats, including potential prosecution for unauthorized possession of classified information, even though the information in question had been generated through private research on private property and had never been classified until government decided retroactively to assert control over it. The breaking point came when Brandon learned through confidential sources that federal agencies were actively preparing eminent domain proceedings to forcibly seize Skinwalker Ranch from his ownership using national security justifications. The legal theory being developed would claim that the underground structure and associated phenomena represented potential threats to national security or valuable technological resources that justified overriding private property protections. Brandon realized that if the government succeeded in taking the property, all research would immediately cease. The scientific team would be disbanded, and everything discovered would disappear into classified programs where it might remain hidden for decades or forever. The most significant and legally dangerous information Brandon Fugal disclosed in violation of his non-disclosure agreements involves the complete technical specifications and analysis results of the massive metallic structure buried beneath Skinwalker Ranch's mesa, data that Department of Defense officials had explicitly and repeatedly ordered him to keep classified at the highest security levels. When Brandon made his public announcement at the scientific conference, he didn't just acknowledge that something was buried underground as he'd hinted previously in carefully worded statements. He provided exact dimensions, precise depth measurements, detailed material composition analysis, and most explosively, electromagnetic signature data that government officials had specifically identified as potentially compromising to classified military and intelligence programs. Brandon publicly disclosed that the structure measures precisely 300 feet in length, 150 feet in width, and approximately 40 feet in height, buried at a depth of 200 to 250 feet beneath the surface, positioned at coordinates that he provided down to GPS precision that would allow anyone with drilling equipment to target the exact location. He revealed material density analysis, showing the structure contains metallic alloys with compositional signatures that don't match any known terrestrial mining, manufacturing, or geological processes, suggesting either ancient metallurgical capabilities far beyond what mainstream archaeology acknowledges for the relevant time period, or materials of non-terrestrial origin that exhibit elemental ratios and isotopic distributions inconsistent with Earth's geological formation. Most damaging from a national security classification perspective, Brandon disclosed the specific electromagnetic frequencies and modulation patterns that the structure actively generates, operating primarily in the 1.6 to 2.2 GHz range with pulse intervals of exactly 47 seconds and amplitude variations that correlate with astronomical cycles. Defense Department officials had explicitly classified this frequency data because it overlaps with and potentially interferes with classified military satellite communications, radar early warning systems, and signals intelligence collection operations. By making this information public, Brandon essentially revealed that there exists on U.S. territory an active electromagnetic transmission source that has been operating for thousands of years on frequencies that the military considers strategically sensitive for national defense and intelligence operations. Government attorneys immediately recognized this disclosure as potentially actionable under espionage statutes because it revealed technical specifications of electromagnetic systems that could theoretically be exploited by foreign adversaries to interfere with U.S. military capabilities, even though the source is ancient technology rather than a contemporary military installation. Perhaps the most politically explosive aspect of Brandon Fugal's NDA violation involves his public identification of specific classified government personnel who visited Skinwalker Ranch to conduct their own assessments, experiments, and data collection, individuals whose involvement in paranormal and UAP research had been carefully hidden from public knowledge and whose identities were protected by multiple layers of security classification and non-disclosure agreements. Brandon's NDAs explicitly prohibited him from disclosing the names, agencies, or even the fact of visits by government officials to the property. But in his public statements following his decision to break silence, he systematically identified key figures and their organizational affiliations in ways that Pentagon officials immediately recognized as serious breaches of compartmented information security. Among the most significant revelations were Brandon's disclosures about personnel from the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, the Pentagon's now publicly acknowledged but previously classified UAP research initiative that operated from 2007 to 2012 under Defense Intelligence Agency oversight. Brandon named specific AATIP officials who had visited Skinwalker Ranch during both the Bigelow ownership period and Brandon's own tenure, conducting classified assessments of the phenomena and collecting data that was incorporated into reports delivered to senior Pentagon leadership and congressional intelligence committees. These visits had been completely scrubbed from official records and denied in response to Freedom of Information Act requests, making Brandon's confirmation of their occurrence particularly damaging to government efforts to maintain plausible deniability. Brandon also identified senior Air Force generals with oversight responsibilities for UAP investigations who had personally toured the property and observed phenomena including electromagnetic anomalies above the mesa, unexplained aerial objects exhibiting flight characteristics that violated known physics, and radiation readings consistent with what had been detected at other government-controlled sites where UAP encounters had occurred. The presence of active duty flag officers at a private property investigating phenomena that the Air Force publicly dismissed as misidentifications or weather balloons created significant embarrassment for military leadership and raised questions about what the Pentagon really knows versus what it tells the public. Most controversial were Brandon's revelations about defense contractor personnel from major aerospace companies, including Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works division and Northrop Grumman's Advanced Systems Group, who visited Skinwalker Ranch as part of classified technology assessment programs. Among the most significant classified information Brandon Fugal disclosed in violation of his non-disclosure agreements involves the existence of a coordinated government mapping and monitoring program that identifies Skinwalker Ranch as one node in a global network of locations exhibiting similar anomalous electromagnetic signatures, geological characteristics, and recurring UAP activity patterns. This revelation directly confirms long-held suspicions among researchers that government agencies have been systematically studying multiple sites worldwide where conventional physics appears to break down and unexplained phenomena occur with statistical regularity that exceeds random chance. Brandon publicly disclosed that during classified briefings with Pentagon officials and defense intelligence personnel, he was shown proprietary government maps marking approximately 12 locations worldwide that exhibit the same distinctive characteristics observed at Skinwalker Ranch: buried metallic structures generating electromagnetic emissions in specific frequency ranges, recurring aerial phenomena that defy conventional aerospace engineering, localized gravitational anomalies detected through precision measurement, and historical records of indigenous cultures identifying these locations as sacred or spiritually significant sites to be avoided. The classified designation used internally by government researchers for these sites reportedly references ancient installation complexes, suggesting official recognition that what's being studied predates modern human technological civilization and may represent either lost advanced cultures or non-human engineering. Most explosively, Brandon confirmed that Skinwalker Ranch's electromagnetic signature characteristics specifically match patterns documented at several highly classified U.S. military installations, including Area 51's S4 facility in Nevada, where reverse engineering of recovered non-human technology has allegedly occurred according to whistleblower testimonies. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, which houses the National Air and Space Intelligence Center and has long been rumored to store anomalous materials and craft, and Dugway Proving Ground in Utah, where classified aerospace tests and exotic propulsion experiments have been conducted under special access program restrictions. The implication of these matching electromagnetic signatures across government-controlled sites in Skinwalker Ranch is profound. It suggests the military has been deliberately studying similar phenomena at classified facilities for decades, while publicly denying any interest or knowledge, and that site selection for certain classified programs may have been driven by the presence of these ancient buried structures rather than by conventional strategic or logistical factors. Despite the Skinwalker Ranch television series airing for multiple seasons on the History Channel, Brandon Fugal revealed that the most significant evidence and dramatic footage collected by the team remains locked in secure archives and will never be broadcast due to classification restrictions and legal prohibitions that extend beyond his personal NDAs to encompass the entire production company. The suppressed evidence includes full-spectrum video documentation of aerial objects exhibiting flight characteristics that violate known physics, instantaneous acceleration from stationary position to thousands of miles per hour, 90-degree directional changes at high velocity without deceleration, and hovering against wind that would destabilize any conventional aircraft. History Channel's legal department determined that broadcasting this footage would potentially expose the network to liability under national security laws if the objects were classified military craft, or trigger government seizure of the recordings if they documented genuinely anomalous phenomena that agencies wanted to control. Even more disturbing are the radiation measurements from experiments near the underground structure that produced readings so extreme, multiple Roentgens per hour in localized areas, that broadcasting them would cause public panic and potentially violate Nuclear Regulatory Commission reporting requirements. Audio recordings exist of apparent transmissions detected during high-energy experiments that contain structured patterns resembling mathematical sequences or language constructs that signal processing experts cannot classify as any known human communication protocol or natural phenomena. Perhaps most censored are the biological analysis results from mutilated cattle found on the property showing surgical precision impossible with conventional instruments, cuts exhibiting cellular-level cauterization, complete blood removal without external spillage, and organ extraction through incisions too small for the removed tissue, suggesting technology far beyond publicly known medical capabilities. Brandon Fugal's decision to publicly violate multiple federal non-disclosure agreements has exposed him to severe legal consequences that his attorneys warned could result in financial ruin, criminal prosecution, and potential imprisonment under espionage statutes typically reserved for cases involving disclosure of weapons system specifications or intelligence methods. Federal prosecutors have several potential legal pathways for charging Brandon depending on which specific classified information they choose to prioritize in any indictment. The most serious charges could come under Title 18 U.S.C. Section 793 of the Espionage Act, which criminalizes unauthorized disclosure of information relating to national defense. If prosecutors argue that the electromagnetic frequency data and government facility connections he revealed could potentially aid foreign adversaries in developing countermeasures to U.S. military systems. Such charges carry maximum sentences of 10 years imprisonment per count, and prosecutors could charge multiple separate counts for each distinct piece of classified information disclosed. Beyond criminal exposure, Brandon faces massive civil penalties from breach of contract lawsuits that government agencies can file seeking damages for violation of his NDAs, with potential liability reaching hundreds of millions of dollars if courts calculate damages based on claimed harm to national security programs or costs of damage control and reclassification efforts. Most immediately threatening is the possibility of emergency court orders freezing his assets and granting government agencies authority to seize Skinwalker Ranch itself under national security provisions that allow temporary property seizure when classified information or materials are at risk of further unauthorized disclosure, effectively accomplishing through legal process what eminent domain proceedings would have achieved through direct property acquisition. While Brandon Fugal made the personal decision to violate his non-disclosure agreements and accept the legal consequences, other members of the Skinwalker Ranch investigation team remain bound by their own NDAs and security clearances that prevent them from publicly discussing their experiences, observations, and scientific findings, regardless of Brandon's disclosure. Dr. Travis Taylor, as a current defense contractor with active security clearances related to his work on classified aerospace and directed energy programs, faces particularly severe restrictions that extend far beyond his Skinwalker Ranch NDAs to encompass his entire professional career and future employment prospects. His inability to publish peer-reviewed scientific papers about the electromagnetic phenomena, materials analysis, or structural discoveries at Skinwalker Ranch represents a major professional sacrifice, as academic publication and peer recognition are fundamental to scientific careers and reputation. Dragon, the former security chief, whose real name and background remain partially obscured, has made cryptic public statements hinting at explosive reasons for his departure from the ranch that he's legally prohibited from explaining explicitly, suggesting his NDAs cover not just scientific discoveries but also operational security incidents or interpersonal conflicts that government agencies deemed sensitive. Eric Bard and other team members who participated in classified experiments or witnessed phenomena during visits by government officials have provided sealed testimonies to Pentagon investigators that they cannot discuss publicly without risking prosecution. The culture of enforced secrecy has created frustration within the scientific team as groundbreaking discoveries that could advance human knowledge remain trapped in classified bureaucracy. Brandon Fugal's public statement explaining his decision to violate federal non-disclosure agreements centers on a fundamental moral principle that he believes transcends legal obligations created through government classification systems. that discoveries at Skinwalker Ranch represent knowledge that belongs to all humanity, rather than being the exclusive property of classified military and intelligence programs that operate beyond public accountability or scientific peer review. Brandon articulated his belief that evidence of ancient advanced civilizations or non-human technology should not be buried in special access programs where it remains hidden indefinitely, accessible only to small groups of cleared personnel who may lack the diverse expertise necessary to fully understand what's been discovered. He framed his NDA violation as civil disobedience comparable to historical cases where individuals broke unjust laws to expose government wrongdoing or reveal truths that powerful institutions wanted suppressed. Most provocatively, Brandon issued a direct challenge to federal agencies. Prosecute me in open court where the evidence I disclosed will be presented to a jury of American citizens who can judge whether classification was justified or whether government has been hiding transformative discoveries that could revolutionize human understanding of history and technology. He calculated that public prosecution would force government to either defend their classification decisions in transparent proceedings where the Streisand effect would dramatically amplify public awareness of Skinwalker Ranch discoveries, or quietly decline prosecution and tacitly acknowledge that their classification regime lacks legitimate justification. Whether Brandon's sacrifice opens floodgates of disclosure from other researchers at classified sites or results in even more aggressive government suppression of paranormal research remains to be seen.